So this week on the Mixed Reality Toolkit livestream, we're going to cover a bit more of the input system. Last week, we went over basic highlighting, clicking, and voice commands. This week, I want to do something fun and cover the Xbox controller input and maybe a few other topics if we have time. So let's go ahead and get started. I've got this scene we created last week open here in Unity. We've got our cubes and basic prefabs and managers in the scene. Many of the basic prefabs can be quickly added to your scene by using the Mixed Reality Toolkit's Project Setup Wizard. I'm going to enable the Xbox controller support for our project. It should prompt you to download the Input Manager asset from the GitHub repository. It'll copy and replace your old input definitions so you don't lose them. You can find your current input definitions via Edit, Project Settings, Input. The inspector window will show you the array of axis and button definitions that are enabled for your project. If you download the Input Manager asset, you'll see that the definitions have already been updated for you to include all of the controller data you'll need. Now that we're set up, I'm going to create an empty game object to put our input source on. I'll move this up onto our Input Manager's game object. Next, I'll add the Xbox controller input source. If you need a custom solution to your input mappings, you'll want to add them here. You can define your own custom input mappings if you decide not to download the Input Manager through the Project Settings window. You want to use the same string values that you've defined in your project's input settings. One important thing to note here is the event system overrides. These settings are important for handling the correct type of events that you want to be raised when interacting with Unity GUI elements. Vertical and horizontal handles scrolling and navigation. Submit and cancel are generally buttons used for doing basic menu actions. For now, I'm going to leave these as they are. Next, I'll add the set global listener helper script so we get all of our raised events from this source. Then we'll create a new script for our Xbox input handler. I'll go ahead and add this script to the same game object we've got our Xbox controller input handler on. Let's clean this class up a bit and get rid of the default lines we don't need. Then implement the iXbox controller handler. This gives us a couple of different methods that we need to fill out. We've got on Xbox access update, on gamepad lost, and on gamepad detected. So let's take a look at what's under the hood for your interface. All iXbox controller handler does is provide a way to get the access updates. And it inherits from iGamepad handler, which provides a way to get the source raised and lost events. If I were to turn on and off the Xbox controller during runtime, these events would get raised and handled by our script. All the events get raised by the Xbox controller input source. Let's look at under the hood for that script as well. What it does is it goes through all of the joysticks the input system has enumerated in its string array. Then we add our own internal list that gets pulled every so often. So let's add some debug statements to show when our source found and source lost events get raised. We will fill out the access update later. But to give you an idea about what to expect, the event data essentially holds all the information you're going to need for handling your input. It has all the button and access information. So let's go ahead and test what we've got so far. It looks like we're getting some errors about the improper access setup. I'm going to go back and make sure all of our input definitions are correct. Looks like our controller definitions in code haven't been properly updated. I'll have to quickly update this. Okay, now let's try again. It looks like we did find our Xbox controller, but we're still getting some errors about bad input definitions. The reason why this is kind of broken so badly is because we're getting prepared to support the motion controllers, and some of them share axis and button definitions. Also, if you have other types of controllers that you're using, you need to be aware that this might have conflicts as well. I'm going to have to just double check with the Master Toolkit's Project Xbox controller testing to verify that we've got everything set up properly. So I had forgotten that I wrote the handler base class to simplify some of the logic. Let's look at what's inside the base class. Having the base class helps abstract a lot of the toolkit's input system, and generally I try to inherit from them whenever I can. Let's go ahead and update our test scene with it. So now we can clean up our inherited class just a bit and remove the interface references in this file. So essentially this base class handles a lot of the core functionality for the Xbox controller. We have a setting for the global listener, which adds it to as a global listener so that we can get input data, even when we're not gazing at the object. Then on gamepad detected, we're just setting up the name of our controller. And on gamepad lost, we just set it back to an empty string. We also have quite a bit of helper methods as well for passing in event data and the input type that you're wanting to get back. There's one for button up, button down, and button pressed. In another version, I think I've actually added the ability to get the axis event data as well, and I moved all of these into the Xbox controller mapping class. Probably see an update in the toolkit for that soon. So let's take a look back at the scene we've been working on to try and figure out what this missing input definition is. Okay, third time's a charm, right? Let's try again. Looks like we're still getting some issues with the definitions. You know what? I bet it's because this is none. Let me check this out. Yeah, that's exactly what it was. That looks like something I need to go and fix later. So having this set to none was actually what was causing that issue to come up. Okay, so let's see here. So we have our base class that we're going to extend from, and we have our Xbox controller handler. And again, I'm just going to have the toolkit testing up as reference, and we're going to kind of go along with that and figure out what we want to do. I'm not going to make it exactly like that testing because, I don't know, maybe I want to do something with these cubes, and I want to make the tutorial a little bit more in-depth. So let's see what we got. So first thing I want to do, I actually want to check to see if our controller mapping has the extras that we had. No, it doesn't. Okay, so I'm just going to copy just a little bit from the toolkit example here. Let's see here. I'm going to go to the base class. Oh, it already has this stuff, actually, or it should. Let me make sure that's in my base class in our tutorial. Oh, it is. Okay, that's all I need, really. All right, so I'm going to close these then, and just keep our handler. So maybe what do we want to do with these cubes? Let's just move them around. That seems fairly straightforward. Very similar to the tutorial. So the first thing I want to do is I want to have a reference to the objects that maybe we're going to be moving around. And we can get this a couple of different ways. We can assign it directly in the inspector if we wanted. Or we could maybe do it with gaze. And maybe just to show how to do it with gaze, I think that might be a good idea actually. So whenever you're looking at the object whenever you're looking at the object, you'll move the object. And then when you look away, it'll stop moving. But you'll still be getting your joystick input. It's just that while you're looking at the specific object, we'll be moving that specific object. I think that sounds like a good idea. So the first thing I think we should do is set up exactly which buttons we'll be wanting to use for that. And in our tutorial here, you can actually do this by using the controller button mapping types. And essentially what this does is it gives you a option in the inspector to choose which button or axis that you want to use for a specific thing. Alright, so I guess for moving around the objects, let's use the right stick horizontal. This should actually probably be a mask, that way we can use both. And I actually want to rename this. I don't want it to be reset button. Let's see. Let's get rid of this tutorial one. There we go. Our horizontal moving axis, and then we'll do our vertical as well. Alright, so that'll give us both of our axes that we want to use to move around our object. So let's do right stick horizontal, right stick vertical. That'll be our move axes. You could probably make this into a mask, so you could choose multiple ones for the axes at least. But for now, I don't think that's really that big of a deal. Okay, so because we have a base class, we should probably extend from some of the virtual methods that we have here. So the main one that we want is the Xbox Axis Update. What did I name it? Oh, it's public, that's why. That would make sense. It would help if I had the other stuff. There we go. It should be. Autocomplete. That's what I'm looking for. Okay. And because our base class doesn't actually do anything, we don't have to call back to the base. You could if you feel like it. If you decide that you want to extend that base handler base class, you're more than welcome to call back to it if you need to do some specific handling of anything that you need to do. And again, the event data is where we're going to be getting all of our axes inputs. So some of the things we could do here. So let's see. I'm going to actually set these here just because. Let's see. Do the right stick horizontal and right stick vertical. That way if our script gets reset, it'll reset to the ones that we're wanting to actually use. Okay, so again, we have our button press. We can also do axes as well, I believe, on this. Let's see. So actually the first thing we probably want to do is the gaze, right? So that's one of the other things as well. So we're going to use our gaze to move it. So we have our gaze manager and our raycast layers. Those look good. So we're going to be looking at our gaze manager to get the current gazed object. Gaze transform. So I'm just going to keep this here for now because I know I'm going to want to use that. Let's see. So let's look back at our tutorial real quick. Let's see. What had I done here? Call back to the base. Are we doing anything in this? No. That's okay. Alright. So I'm just going to copy a couple of these things. So we got a speed and movement multiplier. So I'm going to grab these. These will come in handy later. And then also I'll take a look at what's going on here. Okay. So in ours, let's just at first check to make sure that we have a gaze transform. So if our gaze transform is not null, then we will update our object's position. And this will work on any object in the scene. If you wanted to do more advanced things, like maybe checking the layer, I think we should actually do that. So what I'll do is, for these, I'll actually give them a specific layer to add them to. Let's see. Just picking something random. I'll use layer 8 for that, and I'll set both the cubes. Actually, just to show how this would work, I'll set one of the cubes to be the layer and one of the cubes not. So again, I just added a new layer and set it to Xbox Interactables. So we'll check to make sure our gaze transform is not null. And actually, let's cache this at the beginning here. So it'd be great if I could spell. It's just not. That's fine. Alright, so if our interactable is not null and our game object's layer is equal to 8. We could actually set this up so we could use layer masks in this as well, instead of using just a magic number here. Let's see, let's do that as well. Let's see. We'll look at the gaze manager to see how they're doing their layer raycast mask. It's just an array. Okay. I'm not sure if I'll set this actually. I think that should just show up. I think there's something I have to do to make it actually show the. That's not on cube interactions, is it? Yeah. There we go. That should be fine for what we want to do. And then, let's see. You can actually get it so that it's nicer and it shows the enum pop up, but I'm not really too worried about that at the moment. So what we can do is for each of these, we can actually probably just use one instead of an array. probably what I'll do. There we go. So this actually makes it so that it comes up with that new pop-up. Let's see here. And then I believe, let's see if there's a way to get this out. So you can get a value. But I think this returns a bit mask. So that could be different sometimes depending on like how you're trying to use it. Can we do multiple ones here? We can. Yeah, so that's going to return a bit mask value, so that may not be exactly what we want to use. For simplicity's sake, I think I'm just going to could make this an integer actually. For now, just for the simplicity's sake, I think I'm going to do that. Because we know exactly what layer it is. It's on layer 8. We set it up to be that way. All right. So what we're doing now is we are getting our interactable, caching it. We're getting it from the gaze manager's current transform. We're making sure it's not null and it's on the layer that we set it to be interactable. All right. So a couple of other things we need to do when we first set up. So when we're passing in the updated transform information, we want to reset our transformation information every time. So I'm just going to get a vector 3 so I can cache it. Let's see. Actually, probably not a new vector 3. Let's do vector 3, 0. All right. And just to go back to the toolkit real quick, let's see. We got our initial position, a new position, and a new rotation. I'm going to grab just this one, actually. That should be fine. And I'm actually still going to keep that vector 3, 0. Let's see here. And then just to reference back here real quick. Oh, looks like we set it to 0 on each of the axes updates, which is probably what we want to do, actually. Let's see. Yeah, I'm not going to worry about that then. Just go ahead and copy this. Get rid of this. All right. So that's just to clear out any of our current update information. All right, and then our new position is going to equal our event data. Actually, I think there's a better way to do this. Xbox controller. Actually, I don't know if I wrote the extension for that yet. That's something I still needed to add. Essentially just passing in the axes and then getting out exactly what you need. I think for now, though, we definitely want to just use, so we got our times and multiplier. Okay. Let's see, do our x position. We're going to multiply that by our movement speed multiplier. You can also use time as well. Let's see. If you wanted to give it a little bit more character, and to do like a little bit more of a smoothing movement, you could do that as well. Let's see. Let's do X and Y for now. I got the wrong one. Xbox right stick vertical axis. Yep. You could even make it so that on different axes you have different speed multipliers as well. So if you wanted to have a different speed multiplier on a different axes, you can do that. That way, maybe it moves faster on one and then slower on another axis. Now we haven't used these yet, and that kind of helps us get to our customization. So I want to try to remember exactly how to do this. I believe you could do something like Xbox controller mapping. Let's see. We'll take a look at this base class and see exactly how we did it there. So we got on button up, on button press, and on button down. And all we do is pass in our event data and return the type. So I'm actually going to create this and show you guys how to maybe write some helpers to get back this access data that we want. So let's see here. So we're going to return not a Boolean, but a float value. Let's see, on axis. And we're going to pass in our Xbox controller mapping types. And then our Xbox controller data event handler. Or yeah, Xbox controller event data. And that's going to be the same data from our inheriting class. We'll be passing in this information here. All right. So just like in these other ones, essentially all we're doing is we have a switch, and we're switching which type of button we're handling, and then passing back the correct data. So let's go ahead and write that out. Switch axis type, and go ahead and let the tools I have generate the rest of the labels for me because I'm lazy. And then, let's see, on axis, what's going on? Not all values returned. Okay, that's fine. So for none, we'll return 0. And then for the rest, essentially what we'll do is we'll take our event data and we'll do it by what we need. So let's see here. So for all of our button types that aren't axis types, like all of our actual buttons, I'm just going to remove these and return 0. Same with null, or with none. Okay, so that leaves us with our axes. So we're going to return our event data, and then we're going to do the specific axis for each one of the types. So for this one, it's Xbox left stick horizontal. And for the sake of simplicity, I'm just going to try and copy and paste these real quick. Alright. Be great if they had the same names actually. You just copy and paste from your event data. May change that, I'm not sure yet. Let's see, we want our shared trigger axis, and then our right trigger, our left trigger, D-pad vertical, D-pad horizontal, right stick vertical, right stick horizontal, and then what do we got here? buffs vertical. All right, so that's how we would create an extension to get kind of like the button types that we want back. So the really great part about this is now we can assign, like if you have designers or whoever that is dealing with setting up a scene or something like that, they can go in and it's a lot easier just to pick and choose what they want to use. So if they want to do something a little bit different, maybe in a different scene, it makes this a lot more customizable. Okay, so instead of getting our event data horizontal axis, we're actually going to call the base class, let's see, on axis, and we're going to pass in our horizontal move and our event data. All right, I'll just copy this and put it in here, and let's update this to be our vertical move axis. Actually, I'm going to say get axis. Seems more straightforward. Okay, so that should work. Go ahead and turn on the Xbox controller and see what we get. Get axis. Did I not save all of the? It's not saved all. Clicking too many buttons. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and turn on my Xbox controller and then test this out. Alright, so again, we have to be looking at our object to get the input data. Alright, so nothing yet. Did I do the other one? Are we getting our controller raised? Let's see here. Just because I want to make sure, I'll go in here and I'll just copy and paste these logs to make sure that we're getting our gamepad raised and lost. That should be good. There it goes. I guess it wasn't reconnected yet. Try this out again. There we go. Yep, we're getting it. It's awesome. It's great. See if this works as intended. Nope, not quite. Alright, so let's see what's going on here. So we have it as global listener. We are getting our gamepad detected, raised. We've set our right stick horizontal and vertical, and move axis. Oh, that's why. Our interactable layer got reset. So let's see how that works now. Alright, so let's actually go ahead and debug what we have. I'm going to add a breakpoint here and attach to Unity and see what we get. Alright, I'll go into this. Let's see if we got interactable. Awesome. So it looks like it's the HoloLens camera. There's our base there. Do we have an actual interactable object? It's the HoloLens camera transform. Oh, I'm getting the wrong information for our gaze. That's what it is. The gaze transform is actually our camera. So what we really want is our hit info, I believe. Our hit object. That's really what we want. I'll just change this to game object. You know what? We were updating this, but then I never assigned the position back to the object itself. So it would have never moved anyway. Why don't we go ahead and do that real quick? Go ahead and stop Unity. All right, so we get updated our new position information. We'll take our interactable and we will get the transform, and let's update the local position. The reason why I'm using the local position instead of the global position is because we're only updating it a small amount each time. We'll just pass in the new position. Okay, so this should be better. Go back to Unity. Now that I know that we're getting our raised events, I'm actually going to go ahead and get rid of this debug information. And also be sure to set that to the right layer as well. All right. There we go. So there we go. Now it's going up and down, left and right, exactly how we want. And now that our gaze moved off of it, it stopped moving. You see that? So now we're not moving. Now we're gazing. Now we're moving. Cool. You guys have any questions about that? I know it was a little convoluted maybe because there was a couple of things, but I wanted to show you guys how to at least extend the way that you get your input data if you needed to get specific stuff, and how to customize that stuff. So when we do the motion controllers, I also want to do it so that we could just assign some vertical axes or whatever you want to do, your move axes in the inspector, and be able to get a specific kind of interactable layer for your interactive objects. Okay, what's something else we could do with this? So say you didn't want to use your interactable layer and you wanted to actually move a specific object. So what I'll do is I'll create a public game object field, and we'll assign that either through code. So you can have your own logic that sets this and calls back to your Xbox controller handler class that updates this when you need it to, or you can set it in the inspector. And I'll set this one in the inspector. So for our other cube that we didn't use the layers for, we'll assign that one. Okay. And let's see, what could we do with this cube? We'll actually go ahead and rotate this one. So I'm just going to copy and paste these. Actually set my interactable layer here too, in case that gets reset again, because it most likely will. Let's see, our horizontal. Let's rotate this other cube that we're going to be assigning. And we'll use the left stick this time. All right. So what we'll do is we'll check again if our movable object is not null. I think that's really all we need to do for this one. We don't really care if it's on an interactable layer or not, because we're going to be manually assigning this. And we're pretty much going to do the same thing as before. So I'm going to do private vector 3, and it'll be our new rotation. All right. And every time we come in here, we want to reset it to vector 3, 0. And then we'll say our new rotation plus equals get axis. And we're going to pass in our horizontal rotate axis in our event data. And I also need to assign which axis for our rotation as well. Actually, I think I might do just the y-axis for this. This one should probably be xz. And then we can also have a speed multiplier as well for that. And because we're not using a specific axis, I'm actually going to cut this down. We're just going to have one rotational axis, and we're just going to rotate it around the y, so around the top. All right, so we'll also multiply it by our rotation speed multiplier, and then our time as well. Again, you can also have some logic that like if you were to pause your game, you can also choose if you want to use the unscaled time, so that like maybe if you have some UI or something that you're messing with, there's a difference there. For now, I think that it's fine to use delta time for what we're doing here. And then we'll take our movable object, and we want to do the local rotation. We want to transform local rotation. We're going to do times equals Quaternion Euler. We'll pass in our new rotation. Now the reason why I use local rotation is because with this, we're only doing small increments to our axis, and it'll probably be better to use local rotation, because that way, if you wanted to rotate the object on another axis, it will only spin on the axis that you want it to. So let's try that out. Let's see, assign my cube, got that there. All right. Well, trial and error, something's not working, so let's go back in here. Let's just double check. So if our movable object is not null, then we update our horizontal rotate axis to our left stick horizontal, and our speed multiplier times time. Interesting. Just take a look at this real quick to see what I did here. Huh. What's going on? Did I forget to set the updated? All right. So let's go ahead and attach this to Unity and do a quick debug, just for sanity's sake. All right. Actually, remove this breakpoint for now and continue, so that we can get some sort of information about this. Okay. And then I'll go ahead and add the breakpoint back. So we got our cube, and then when we come in here, we reset our rotation, and then looks like it's not returning anything with anything. But it should be assigning it. Let's see. Let me just remove this time multiplier just to see if maybe that'll help. So I noticed in the other example I didn't have that. So we're using our horizontal rotate axis, left stick horizontal. Yep. All right. Maybe we're getting something strange happening with that time multiplier. There it goes. Yeah, I think it was just that time multiplier must have made that value really small. So Now we can rotate back and forth on its y-axis in its local position. There we go. All right, and then maybe let's do some button presses as well. So maybe if we click one of these guys, something will happen. Now, in the previous demo, I showed that we had this stuff happening on the object itself. And for the most part, that would be great. But it's listening for input click handler. And the Xbox doesn't exactly have, the Xbox controller functions don't exactly raise that sort of thing unless you want it to, right? So what we could do, let's make one more field here. And this is going to be for selection. Maybe if we press the A button, then something happens. There's a couple of different ways we can do this as well because of the way that we've set it up with our event system. Whenever we press play, if you watch the standalone input module, it'll actually get updated to use the Xbox axes. Okay, so there's an important thing here, and it also forces the module active. And this is important because it overrides the mouse and keyboard as well. And if you don't do that, then generally you won't get the inputs going to the right places, and you won't get it to work well with the Unity GUI. So that's part of the reason why we update that and override it. And the second that you turn, like if I were to turn the Xbox off, it takes forever pressing this button. So if I turn the Xbox off, it'll actually reset these as needed. So now they're back to normal. So it only overrides it if it detects that there's a controller. So go ahead and turn that back on. And we should see this update once again. Okay. Now because we're setting, in our event system, we're setting the submit and cancel buttons to be specifically these. We could use those. Or if you wanted, you can also set your own custom one as well. So let me do Y. And we're just going to reset our, yeah, that's what we'll do. We'll reset the position of our cube that we're getting, our interactable cube. So let's see here. Let's just do Xbox Y. That's a good point, Julian. It could have been spinning so fast that we hadn't actually seen the movement update. Okay, so let's see. Let's just call this reset button. All right, so, looks like I did something I shouldn't have. May have accidentally destroyed my copy. There we go. All right, so now we have our reset button, and it's being set to be our Xbox Y. And, excuse me. All right, so we got our reset button, and it's being set to be on our y-axis. And then whenever we press it, we're going to reset it. And we'll do it last, after we do our axis update. So this, I don't know if this is a good name for this, but on Xbox axis update, it also updates the buttons as well. So maybe it should be on Xbox event update or something like that. I don't know. I didn't really think of a good name the first time, so that's my apologies there. Let's see, so if we get our button down, so there should be some helpers that are already existing here. On button up, actually. On button down is if you like press and hold, which we don't want to do that. Button pressed is just like a trigger, so it only gets called just the first update that it was down. So we could use this as well. On button up, I feel like is a little bit more reliable sometimes because you know for sure you're just getting it the one time. I think pressed actually does do a continuous update. I don't know. You guys check it out. Test, play around with it, see what you come up with. I'm going to use button up. So actually copy this. So on button, not the whole thing. On button up, and we'll pass in our reset button and our event data. So when we get our reset button up press, then we'll come in here and we can say interactable game, or actually it's that already we want to transform, and we're going to set it to our initial position for the object. So let's create a new private vector3. Actually, interesting thing here. We'd probably only be able to do the initial position for our assigned object. So I'm actually going to use our assigned object instead of our interactable. Might be a little bit more complicated to get the initial position for our interactable when we first wake up, because we may not have our gaze on it. So that might be a little bit more complicated. That might have to be like an internally stored variable on the object itself that you need to keep up with. So just for the sake of simplicity, we're going to use just our movable object, and we're going to call on start. Actually, we should be able to call awake just fine. You're working with inherited classes. You have to, especially when it comes to mono behaviors, you have to really think about which of the Unity APIs you're overriding, because sometimes that can be important, because if you don't do it right, you may not get the API called correctly. So we're not actually inheriting we're not overriding any of the awakes in any of the base classes. So we can use just the awake outright for this. So our initial position is going to be our movables position transform position. Global position, not the local position. We want the global position. Right. And then when we press that, then we will say the global position will equal our initial position. Right. So this is giving me a warning that it's not assigned, because we check it here to see if it's assigned or not. We probably don't really need to check for its assignment because we know we're assigning it. And let's see, we'll just move this up into here. Okay, so when we get our button up press, we should get our position reset. Except that we're not moving its position. So yeah, that probably wouldn't work very well. We could reset the local rotation. That's okay. I'm just going to copy what we have up here and paste it down here. And instead of our interactable, we're going to do a removable object. Our movable object. And this should essentially do the same thing. And just because I don't really want this to interfere too much. Well, actually, we have to be gazing at the object. That's okay. All right. So I went ahead and copied the movement logic over to our assigned cube. All right. So I'll make sure my controller's on. Go ahead and save the scene and play. So now, we should also be able to rotate and move the object forward and backwards. All right. So if I press Y, it resets back to where it was before. There you go. And you can also do the same for rotation as well, if that's something you desire. All right. So I'm going to go over to the live chat. Have you guys have any questions about this so far? We're going at an hour, so I might go ahead and wrap it up I did want to cover the Xbox stuff because I know that was a feature that had been missing from the toolkit for a while. And it's definitely some interesting stuff there. The most important thing when I was thinking about trying to do that and setting it up was the customizability for the objects and for the source itself, right? So that was one of the important things. That way, you can reuse a lot of the same components for different projects and stuff like that. Okay, guys. Well, it's been great. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I'm going to go ahead and sign off. Thanks for watching.